Unless you grew up in very specific coastal regions, you've probably never heard of Mooncussers. On Cape Cod, there are those who believe this legend and those who don't.
There was a living to be made off of wrecks and so forth, and not that they were mooncussers. I hate that description.
It was said that mooncussing was a form of piracy, where unscrupulous opportunists would lure ships to wreck by waving lanterns on a dark night. Out at sea, mariners could mistake those lights for other vessels.
And that's where the name Mooncusser came from, because these land pirates were out there on a night when there was no full moon, no moonlight, because if the moonlight was out there, then you could be seen on the beach. Whereas if there's no moonlight, it's very dark and you can't see anything. And that was their advantage. That's when they would use these lights to try to trick these mariners into going in close to shore.
So they would steer right into the shore, and then they'd fall upon these people and take the plunder off the ships, and that was how they made their living. That is the legend.
Back in the day of ship and sail, mariners had to navigate around the Cape. That could be treacherous.
Up until the middle part of the 20th century, span of over 350 years, you had over 3,000 shipwrecks from Provincetown to Monomoy, that whole stretch of outer beach. There's an old saying that if you could raise all of those shipwrecks out of the sand, you could walk from Provincetown to Chatham without getting your feet wet.
They had what they call wrecking crews. That's what they had back in the day. And my great-grandfather Rufus was the skipper of the Old Harbor wrecking crew. And there'd be a crew from down in the village that probably some bloomer was the skipper of. A simple example is that if a vessel ran aground because it fogged, and it ran up on a shoal or sandbar somewhere. So the wrecking crew, that oftentimes was try to compete to get to this vessel first, because they could either make an arrangement, in this case, with the skipper, who's now concerned about his license perhaps, or his job. If not the skipper, in a longer format, it might be with the insurance underwriters to get the vessel off, right? And sometimes it might be that, well, $500 I can get your vessel off, and the desperate captain would be willing to go down and make that deal somehow, and then the guys just wait for the tide to come up and they'd pull it off.
I believe Mooncussers is a very vague term. I have done extensive research in the last 20 minutes, reading Henry Beston, Nancy Payne Smith, and of course, Henry Kittredge. And in all cases, they refer to Mooncussers, and not one of them ascribes the dastardly behavior that I think you're getting at. I believe Mooncussers and wreckers are interchangeable terms.
Yeah, well, why would you know, you can see a light out there, right? But you don't know anything other than it's a vessel, but you don't know, Jesus, is my brother on that? My husband, my wife, my uncle, when half the Chatham is making a living off there somewhere, why would you risk that? I just don't think that happened. It may have to some degree at some point, some places, perhaps, not that it never happened, but I just don't think it was a industry in any way like wrecking was. And wrecking is confused with mooncussing.
I do believe that mooncussing existed for the simple reason that The Mooncusser name was used interchangeably, as far as I can see, in books that I've read, with wreckers, salvagers, land pirates. They're all kind of the same.
The term really comes from England, Mooncussers, and these were people who would ambush other people on stagecoaches and on horseback. So it was more of a land-based thing, apparently, way, way back.
At the turn of the century, there's a lot to consider when it came to salvaging wrecked ships off of Cape Cod.
And what we haven't brought up yet is Helltown. Many thought all the outcasts were out there, runaways, rum runners, people that couldn't live in town. So they would be the usual suspects. If anybody was going to lure ships in, it would be those marginal characters of society. On the other hand, I know that where Helltown is was also where a lot of men, before the gasoline boats, they could ship out faster. Same thing with Long Point. They could get to sea faster. They could get out on the bank faster if they lived at Helltown.
I came in 1946. I walked out to Helltown, and you could still see the stumps of the shacks sticking out of the water, low water. Yeah, it was a whole community there. So this has always been a wildcat area, Every day is a different day. And even to this day, it's that way.
People came and got what they could. But I have not seen anything written about people actually luring ships in, which is what you're referring to. That is a very naughty thing to do. It's akin to manslaughter, and I'm sure it happened, but I see no evidence. And again, perhaps you wouldn't find evidence because no one's going to really brag about that too much.
In Provincetown, there was no luring of boats. It is well known that the men of Provincetown and Truro, when they heard ship ashore, they would run from the town over the backside, all the way over there, to help the men get off the boat. And then it was like a free-for-all. When they were on the backside and they were gathering what they needed, what they could, they would make a pile. That's their pile, And how they marked it, from what I understand, was they took 2 sticks and they put a cross, meaning don't touch.
Yeah.
It's spoken for. And that's how, because they couldn't carry everything they were salvaging.
Yeah.
They had to make a pile
Yeah.
and then move it after they were done.
But that was respected, though.
It was respected. It was very much, because if it wasn't, somebody would get hurt.
Yeah.
There's no GPS. They didn't really know exactly where they might be, and the storms without weather forecasting, all these things play into, it was really a calamity that slowly unfolded over the centuries. Sandbars changed. There's no way to keep track of those.
You have to also remember, on the bars of the backside, those bars go way out, sometimes a mile.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I've seen about Mooncussers was that they would even go to the lighthouses and knock out the lights in some places. Now, that's how much that happened on the Cape. There's not a lot in the way of lighthouses on the Outer Cape, particularly when you go back to the 1700s and the 1800s. A lot of the lighthouses were being built during the first half of the 1800s along the Outer Cape. So there wasn't much light to begin with. And then if you got a foggy night or a stormy night, your visibility is no more than 100 yards, 200 yards.
I think a lot of those stories of putting lights on horses comes from the Outer Banks, North Carolina. In fact, there's a town called Nag's Head, nag being an old horse. And so supposedly they were using horses to carry lanterns back and forth on the coast. And I do tend to agree with Mr. Nickerson in that, you know, if you lived on Cape Cod, it was more likely that your husband or your brother or your other family members, uncles, were out on the water, passing through, trying to deliver goods or packet boat or fishing. So why would you endanger them? Because it's indiscriminate if you have a lantern out there trying to trick people.
I don't think Cape Codders were really all that concerned about the legalities of what was coming ashore. They would take the things first maybe and ask questions later. Their main thing was to get by, to survive.
That's an Anna Dega. She came ashore right over here in 1907. Long story short, she was on the beach all winter long. They actually had steam tugs down here, and they lightened the vessel, as they show in this picture. The guys are all hired. And this guy, Ernie Kendrick, who I have the recordings of, he was part of the wrecking crew, and he says they paid us $5 a day in 1907. That was big money. They took advantage, if you will, of the opportunity to help out a grounded, stricken, or wrecked vessel.
A lot of the professions out here didn't pay particularly well. That's why a lot of them in the 1920s took to rum running. It paid a lot more money, as opposed to being a fisherman or to being a turnip farmer or anything else like that. They were always looking for anything the ocean could bring them. I don't doubt it could have happened. But on the other hand, I don't think it's as common as everybody believes. When men are lost on the beach, the whole Cape takes it very much to heart, talks about it, mulls over it. When men are saved, there is no place where they are treated with greater hospitality and kindness.
Wrecking was a reputable industry. In fact, many wreckers who were good at going in and out of the surf and getting to wrecks, they actually became some of the lifesavers.
And I must stand up for these ancient people who are no longer here to defend themselves. The Humane Society of Massachusetts, do you know, was not about animals. It was about saving shipwrecked men, 1870 something, precursor to the life-saving service, which is precursor to the Coast Guard. So there is a tradition of people in Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet, the Outer Cape, rallying to these shipwrecks, trying to save men, risking their own lives to get people out of the surf.
There was always somebody out there looking to make money, or, you know, I mean, they got sugar, they got clothing, they got bolts of cloth.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a poor town.
Yeah.
There were a few captains that were rich, but everybody else was working, you know, and they needed to supplement. I mean, in the winter when it was really bad weather, they weren't going fishing. How are you going to feed your family of 8 children? You know what I mean? It's like, you got to do what you got to do.
To try to capture a history that really evaded historians, was never put in words, again, because the activity was semi-legal or illegal.
The Francis, which was a ship that sank off ahead of the Meadow, and it still sometimes is visible, 1872. There's a story of it was carrying tin sheets and sugar. Local people were hired to unload the tin and the sugar, and boy, that sugar was just not fully recovered, and it was just disappearing as the men from Cape Cod went back and forth. There's all these stories of just wink, wink, nod, nod. You know, I'm bringing that home.
In the 18th century, and certainly the large part of the 19th century, that boat was never going to, the goods were never going to find their way back to the owner, who might have been in England or might have been in Maine or might have been somewhere. So this really was manna from the seas.
The thing is about the life-saving cruises, they were town men. They were related to everybody. They were, you know what I mean? So they grew up with this culture. So it wasn't surprising, I'm sure. They couldn't partake in it, but they could turn a blind eye.
When it came to the Coast Guard or the lifesavers getting to a ship, that was their number one priority, was the lives of the people on board.
A lot of the wreckers, they were hired by the owners of these ships to salvage what they could.
Sure.
But it was a well-known thing. They took what they wanted. They salvaged, made their money with these guys, but they also took the stuff that they wanted, you know? And that was the way of it back then. You had to supplement your income. Cape Cod was not a rich place. And you have this plunder on the back shore. What are you going to do? Leave it there?
The schooner Montclair wrecked off Chatham during a storm in 1927.
The insurance underwriters were trying to reclaim some of that cargo. The vessel was a loss, but they were trying to get some of the cargo, so they would offer a wrecking crew or anybody who wanted to collect them. They might offer them 10 cents a bundle to give them, to pick up the bundles down the shore, collect as many as you wanted to, and bring them to this agent, and they load them up on a horse and wagon, take them back up to Orleans and put them on a train, and off they go.
We who live in our houses and with all our electronic devices cannot imagine the intimacy that people had with the sea back then in the 18th and 19th century. And they're always scanning the horizon. They're always looking for this ship or that ship coming in. And I just think there was a network of people that were made aware of whatever was happening on the beach.
The people in these towns knew what was going on. There'd be kids in school out in Provincetown and Truro, and they'd hear about a shipwreck while they were in school. They'd skip out of school and go down to the wreck. They'd be some of the first ones there.
If you can help your family get through the winter by going out and picking something up and carrying it back, then that's why the kids were let out of school. All hands on deck.
But the shipwrecks didn't really start to drop off in numbers until technology began to improve in the 20th century, but also the Cape Cod Canal being built. Because that was first built right around the time of the First World War, 1914. And with the Cape Cod Canal, you didn't have to go around the Cape anymore, because a lot of these ships some of them were coming from overseas, but also a lot of them were going between Boston and New York or Philadelphia, and they would have to go around the Cape. Navigating the Cape, especially in those old-fashioned wooden ships, was tough.
In the year 2024, it's not really fair for us to judge somebody in 1824 when there were different standards of behavior. But as you rightly put it out, this was a subsistence economy and people were just getting by. And if something like this came along, it might really make their year.
Wreckers didn't purposely try to attract a vessel ashore. They took advantage of a vessel when it came ashore naturally, if you will, or by someone else's accident, and then they took advantage of that opportunity to make a day's pay.
This is such a delicious subject that is so maddeningly beyond our reach to get at, and we have to get through our own cultural biases and ignorance, really, because very few of us live on the sea, or by the sea, or from the sea, the way it used to be. There was an intimacy 100 years ago, 200 years ago, that we'll never achieve again.